Welcome back to Truth Be Told, where we believe and experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and joining me now in studio, my co-host, Walt Lusk. Thank you for supporting our sponsors, Conscious Life Expo, by going to consciouslifeexpo.com to get your tickets for the 2015 event, which is less than a month away, and we're so excited to be live from the event.
And that's in February 2015, folks. It's the first weekend in February, and we're going to be recording and broadcasting live. And to take your mind on a literary journey by traveling over to adventuresunlimitedpress.com to purchase books from our famed experts featured right here on Truth Be Told.
Well, in our first hour, we had a fantastic conversation with author Stephen Mailer about the crystal skulls, and we focused a lot on the mystery in the background of Pharaoh Akhenaten. And now this brings us to our next hour and our next guest,
author Brien Foerster. And he has many books, but one that we're going to focus on today is The Enigma of Cranial Deformation, Elongated Skulls of the Ancients and the Technology of the True Egypt and its Past.
Brien has traveled the globe and has uncovered evidence in stone that the Great Pyramids and other structures were made thousands of years before the ancient Egypt.
Well, you know, Tony, I don't know about you, but I'm really ready to hear and speak with our guest and author and archaeologist, Brien Foerster.
Is Brien there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How about you?
We're doing great, and we're so honored to have you on the show. I'm here with Walt Lusk, my co-host.
Hey, Brien, it's a pleasure.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, you know, we had your friend on and your travel buddy, Stephen Mailer, just on a little bit ago, and so we're going to go ahead and promote your tour coming up before we even get started, because we heard what it means to him going to Egypt and doing these tours. What is this tour going to be entailing, and why do you want to do these tours?
What's your perspective?
Yeah.
Well, basically, it's the third annual Lost Ancient Technology and Spirituality Tour. And what fascinates me about Egypt is, thanks to Stephen, who invited me last year and the year before, is that we see incontrovertible evidence of the fact that some of the structures in Egypt were not made by the dynastic or pharaonic Egyptians. They're clearly older and of much higher levels of precision.
You think?
Yeah. Why do you think, though, before we get into the details, why do you think so many people are saying opposite?
Yeah, that's my question, is what are they trying to hide, or why are they making a big deal about the fact that they aren't as old as they probably are, and why they're not being open?
Well, I think the basic thing is that there's a paradigm of thought that says that the ancient Egyptian culture began about 3100 BC, so about 5,000 years ago.
Right.
And through archaeology, they found artifacts that they say relate to specific buildings. So, for example, they found a statue of Khufu found upside down, buried next to the Great Pyramid, and so from that and other evidence, they decide that Khufu must have built the Great Pyramid. However, they can't explain how the Great Pyramid was actually constructed. That's one of the major problems.
Well, we've heard that. I mean, since I've been a kid. I'm 45, and I know Walt's way much older than I am. No, I'm just kidding. But people have been talking about this. It's like, how do they build this? How are, because most of the stone wasn't even close to from there, right? Is that correct?
Well, actually, most of the stone is from the Giza Plateau. The problem is that if you haven't seen the Great Pyramid in person, you can see it from many miles away.
Size.
And it by itself is 2.3 million multi-ton limestone blocks.
Right.
That's how big it is. It's more than 500 feet tall.
Wow.
And the footprint is more than 13 acres. So this is an incredible achievement. And a very basic question is, why would it have been constructed so early on in the Egyptian civilization, about 2500 BC, and after that, they weren't able to build anything of that scale? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Do the math.
Right. And when you do the math, because I know you've been doing a lot of research, tell us about some of the cutting, because most people don't realize the precision of the cuts.
Extremely precise. No mortar.
Yeah, of how it was built, how the pyramids was built.
Well, the basic way to understand it is if somebody looks at a brick wall, you see that clearly there's cement in between
Correct,
the bricks.
right.
And that, that isn't a strong way of building a wall, it's a fast way. If you tried to put the bricks on top of each other, without any glue, obviously you're not going to have a very strong structure. But what we see with the Great Pyramid, as only one example, is the fact that there is no mortar or cement involved. And so those stones fit basically perfectly together. And again, there are 2.3 million of them.
2.3 million?
It's quite that's quite a puzzle.
Wow.
It is.
And let's go back a little bit to kind of find out when you started getting really interested in the Egyptian. I know you said was it Stephen that introduced you to that? Because I know you go to Peru and Bolivia a lot. But do you mostly go with just Stephen to Egypt, or have you went on your own for your own research?
I haven't. I, like many people, have been fascinated with ancient Egypt, as in the Enigma of the Sphinx, etc., since I was a little boy.
Right.
But it was 2 years ago that Stephen was given a tour and was asked to invite two experts to come with him. So he brought Christopher Dunn, who's the brilliant engineer,
Right.
and then he decided to bring me because of my knowledge of similar structures in Peru that the Inca culture didn't build, but are as complicated as some of what we find in Egypt.
Now, I know you were talking about the stone cutting technology, and from your experience of seeing it up close, what was your first observation when you got to see the pyramids of how they cut the stone?
Well, the amazing thing is you can still see the cut marks. There's an area of black granite, which is basically flooring outside of the Great Pyramid, and there we see the evidence of the actual circular saws that were used in ancient times to cut basalt, which is an incredibly hard stone.
Now, you said it was basalt?
Right.
Wow. So it's just fascinating to how they cut this. Do we know? It couldn't have just been pitchforks and other stone. So what do you think they did cut with? What do you think they used?
Well, the only thing we can think of in terms of technology that we have would be diamond saw, or diamonds embedded into saws. And from the curvature of the cut, these weren't straight saws cutting back and forth. They were giant circular blades in excess of 20 feet in diameter.
I saw something on Ancient Aliens that validated that. They said that, if that was the case, was there any proof of it? And they found a trench that was, 40, 50 feet long and probably like 15 feet deep, where, a circular saw of that size could fit, and they were able to put the, stones next to it and do their carving.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the fact is that these, it's not just one pit. There are more than one of them. And they're not, they say that they were for burying boats or something. And the boats wouldn't have been wide enough.
Well, no, that doesn't fit.
Yeah, and if you've ever seen a diamond saw cutting stone, it always has to have water with it to act as a lubricant.
Right.
So these giant saws could have easily fit into these pits filled with water, and then rotate at an even speed to cut through the material.
Right. And that was what they did. Was basically they were just laid in, and they had slaves that would turn it, and it was fast enough for it to cut. That was a theory.
Well,
that's a theory.
Is,
but nonetheless, there's trenches to validate that theory.
But is there evidence of a saw?
Actually, we found evidence embedded into the limestone of iron compounds.
Really?
Like iron metal. You can tell because it's these veins of rust, and that could have been the residue of the wear of the saw itself.
But there's never been like a fully intact saw in any type of Egypt area at all, right?
Egyptology.
No, and actually, people do ask about the ancient technology. Why hasn't it been found? And it's quite probable that what happened is that whenever the civilization ended that did all this incredible work,
right,
they probably collapsed due to some reason, and then the site was abandoned, and then later people who would move in would find these tools. They wouldn't know how they work, and so naturally they'd probably take them apart and recycle the material. Just like if you leave a nice car out somewhere, somebody's going to start taking pieces off of it,
Right.
and eventually you'll wind up with nothing. And over the
True.
course of thousands of years, I think that's probably what happened.
Now, like we're talking about, the pyramids and structures that were made thousands of years before
Tens of
that
thousands.
they think that the Egyptians' pyramids were built. Yeah, how do we know this? Is it DNA testing? Is it how do we go
Carbon
about
dating.
Yeah, carbon dating. How do we start with testing to find out that it's true or not true?
Well, the thing with stone is that you can't carbon-14 test it because carbon-14 is only used for organic materials
Okay.
like plants and bones and things like that. But there is a new technique called cosmogenic testing, and it measures the amount of cosmic radiation that's been hitting a piece of stone. So if something has been exposed to the surface for 1,000 years, the amount of cosmic radiation that has penetrated the stone can be measured. The same thing with something that's 10,000 years old. It's a brand new, I believe, American technique, and that's what we're going to employ in the future to be able to date how long the stone has been on the surface.
So at this point, it's still just a theory, not necessarily proven.
Well, it's a question of, we've been taught this paradigm that the Egyptians built everything,
Right.
and yet on our tours we tend to have a lot of geologists
Right.
and also engineers with us, and none of them believe that the Egyptians could have built certain things. Like the Egyptians built a lot of stuff,
Right.
but certain things like the Great Pyramid and the other two pyramids and some other structures are
The Sphinx?
very much in doubt. Yeah, well, the Sphinx as well. The Sphinx has been shown by more than 200 geologists that the weathering began 10,000 years ago.
Began
Wow.
10,000 years ago.
So it's 5,000 years older than the Egyptian,
Just for-
dynastic Egyptian culture.
Just for starters.
But okay, so I'm just because I'm like I said, I'm an enthusiast. I'm not an expert, so I'm always here just to learn from you and people like Stephen, because you guys have lived it, done it, been there, and I want to know when you hear this and we say, okay, if it's before the Egyptians, who was before the Egyptians in this area? Do we know?
Yeah, like who? Like,
Well, according to Stephen and the Kemet School, they were in fact called the Cometians, and they probably lived more than 12,000 years ago. And we know, actually scientifically, there was a global catastrophe that occurred 11,700 to 11,900 years ago that some people refer to as the Great Flood.
yes.
But it was global in nature. It wasn't just the Middle East.
No, it was all four corners have mentioned it.
Yeah, exactly. And also we know scientifically that the end of the Ice Age was not a slow event. It was super fast. And according to Dr. Robert Schoch, who is a geologist, it might have happened in the course of 2 weeks,
Wow.
causing the world's oceans to rise by more than 300 feet.
Wow, that'll
Talk
cramp
about a bad day.
Yeah, that'll cramp your style big time.
Very bad day.
That'll cramp your style big time.
Before we go any further, I want to know. Let's go back a little bit. When you were a young man and realized this is what you wanted to do with your life. What was that first tour, first archaeological site that you went to and discovered something about yourself that you never knew? What was that site that you're just
The aha moment?
the aha moment?
It was a gradual process from childhood. Again, having a fascination with these enigmatic sites all over the world that, some people say the gods built or aliens built or whatever. I've had a fascination with indigenous cultures all of my life just because I've always found their oral traditions to be quite fascinating. So growing up on the west coast of Canada, I started carving totem poles when I was a kid,
Did
and
you
actually
really?
became a professional totem pole carver for
That's
quite
great.
a while.
Wow, I didn't. That's pretty fascinating. My brother can do that. I can't even carve a pencil. So, Yeah.
Or a bar of soap.
Or a
maybe.
bar of soap. Yeah. So the fascination with Egypt, I think, really is worldwide, because that's what we hear about the most. It seems like, I don't know. There seems to be more documentaries about that, and the Egyptian people. When you did you get to interact and ask questions to the Egyptian people on their take on the history of their culture, and is it pretty consistent to what we see and hear on television and these documentaries and Ancient Aliens?
Well, the average Egyptian, I think, believes that the pharaohs built everything, but we're very fortunate in that Stephen's close association with the Awiyan family. They're a very gifted family of the keepers of the ancient oral tradition. So they can probably call back their bloodline at least 12,000 years. They are the original Egyptians, as compared to the majority of the country, who are probably of Islamic origin, moving in around 800 AD.
Right.
So it's like in any country, when you ask a local person about enigmatic things, they usually don't know much. It takes experts and sometimes people from other parts of the world to reveal aspects of them, or try to unravel the mystery of these places.
What is your take on what do you feel the pyramids were built for?
I think they were built as energy facilities.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I've seen this stuff again on Ancient Aliens about the energy aspects, and there was water underneath it initially, and so makes sense.
There's actually a whole series of tunnels that run underneath the Giza Plateau, going east, west, north, south, and I've been down to the third level under the Giza Plateau, but there are many, many below that, and so it seems that whoever these ancient people or beings were that did this work, they had technology of an incredible sophistication.
Yes,
beyond us is what most people
Beyond
can't
today.
grasp. Most people think that we're the pinnacle of humanity because we have cell phones, but whoever did this work, they were able to carve these tunnels through solid bedrock on an almost science fiction level.
And I mean, for example, in Rome, they just figured out not too long ago how to make cement and have it harden in water, which hadn't been done for centuries, a century or two. So, our technology is like, nah. So, in energy, my understanding there were batteries as well that they built and had in small forms as well.
That's true. I mean, Christopher Dunn believes that the Giza Plateau was a number of power plants as an electrical, but it is also possible that they were energetic in a different way. They could have actually been giant Wi-Fi facilities of some kind.
So you're saying more energy versus vibration?
Well, I think, vibrational energy, not so much I don't think they were necessarily creating electricity. I think they were acoustic energy facilities of some kind, again, beyond our present comprehension in terms of what exactly they were being used for.
Because, what isn't it, two of the Great Pyramid, there's two portals, and it's pointing to Sirius and Orion? Is some feel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. See, like I said, I'm so fascinated by this because it's amazing to think that the technology we have, we're just so beginning level when it comes to a lot of the ancient.
I mean, 500 feet is that's tall. I mean, back then, that's tall.
Oh, that's really tall.
I mean, for example, the Washington Monument was 550 feet tall when it was built, and that was supposed to be the tallest structure around for a long time. So 500 feet's a big deal.
Well, when you say 500 feet up, how far below does it go? Does it go 500 or more?
Oh, jeez.
The subterranean chamber, there are three main chambers: the so-called King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and then the subterranean chamber is more than 300 feet into the bedrock.
There you go.
And the most amazing thing is that the passageway that goes obviously at an angle down into it varies from laser perfect by supposedly 1/8 of an inch.
That's crazy. There's no way.
There's no way that a bunch of slaves with with axes were hacking away at the bedrock trying to do this for some king.
Right.
Obviously, these are ancient structures that were inherited by the pharaohs, and then the one called Cheops or Khufu decided to name it after himself because he was the guy in charge.
Now, do you
Why not?
notice a huge difference in because what's the oldest structure and what's the latest structure? The difference is time span, like Pyramid 1 to Pyramid 20. What is the time span between the oldest to the youngest?
Well, that's actually where Stephen has the expertise. What he calls, based upon his teacher Abdel Hakim Awiyan, there's a certain area of the Giza Plateau, area, which is they call Bu Wizard, and that was the most ancient part of it. So the Great Pyramid, the Second Pyramid, and the Third Pyramid are probably all of the same vintage, as well as a few that are to the south. But what happened is that, of course, when the dynastic Egyptians moved in, they saw these beautiful geometric shapes, and so they copied them. And so they made multiple versions of them, but never of the size or quality of the first ones.
And that's what I was going to ask about. It was the type of technology used. You could tell the difference between the oldest to the newest, correct?
Oh yeah, well exactly, because the Great Pyramid is solid limestone with a lot of granite inside, and some of the later ones are made literally of adobe mud, and that's why they're eroding so badly.
Wow. Let's go, Walt. We need to go on this tour.
We do.
I know, right? All right.
We do.
Well, I wanna switch gears and take a flight over to South America because I know this is another one of your specialty, and we are so excited to talk about elongated skulls. So many people ask me about this. I get emails saying this is one of their favorite subjects, and I mean I can see why, because there's so much mystery behind it, and maybe you can shed some light on this for our audience. And so let's talk about cone heads in Peru and Bolivia. What was your first experience of getting involved with the search and research of this?
And the book you wrote, too.
In the book you wrote.
Well, actually, I'm living in Paracas, which is the epicenter of where the largest elongated skulls in the world have been found.
Right.
And so
That's
my wife and I
It's a big tomb,
happened
isn't
to.
it? It's a big
Sorry?
tomb. Is it a big tomb? Wasn't there a big tomb there? Is that where the big tomb was?
Oh, well, there's a huge there are a number of huge graveyards here,
Yes.
but we happened to walk into a little private museum run by Senior Navarro, and he had an elongated skull in a case along with a bunch of pottery and other artifacts, and I just, took a double take and looking at it, and then he said, "Oh, I have more of those at home."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, why don't you bring them to the museum so I can look at them?" Which he did the next day in these cardboard boxes. He took them out.
Wow.
And over the course of 3 years, I assisted in getting funding to increase the collection of elongated skulls that we have in our little museum to 45.
45. In your research, are these different I guess what would you call them, civilizations from different eras, different periods? What are you finding when it comes, because I'm showing the pictures of elongated skulls. There's like 5 of them in the row right now, and they all look very similar, and I'm just trying to figure out, are they all from the same
Those are really
civilization?
elongated, folks, if you're not looking at it.
Yeah, actually, as I said, the largest ones and the ones that are literally cone heads, which I think is where Dan Aykroyd got the idea
Right.
from, are found only in this area, and it's a very obscure culture that the archaeologists literally don't know where they came from. They suddenly appeared here at least 3,000 years ago, and then they disappeared 2,000 years ago. And that's what drew my fascination. Is I can't find archaeologists who can give me a proper answer as to where these strange people came from and then what happened to them.
You would think archaeologists would be the first ones to want to find out.
Yeah, they'd be all over it.
Well, you'd think so, but again, it's the same thing in Egypt, where you have this like paradigm of thought where it's like, no, the Egyptians showed up, they built all this stuff. And then in Peru, it's the same thing. It's like, well, they came from here, and then they mixed with these people and became those people, and then they became another culture and stuff. And logically, it just doesn't make sense. So that's why it's one of my prime focuses, and why we're in the beginnings of doing DNA testing of them as well.
And when someone brings you, let's say they find a skull, and they bring it to the museum, and what is your first testing that you do to verify if it's the same cultures, verify if it's not fake but a true elongated skull? What do you actually do?
Well, the thing is that the title of the book, The Enigma of Cranial Deformation, that I wrote with David Childress, is about a cultural practice that was carried out all over the world amongst royal families, and that was to bind babies' heads in order to produce a certain shape. So the majority of the skulls, you can tell that some kind of binding or cloth was used.
Right.
But there's a small percentage of them where they look so organically natural that they're the ones of key interest. They look like they were born that way because there's no simple technique that could have caused the shape to conform to what it looks like now.
Wow. I'm showing a picture actually of a baby with a bound head, because I know even a lot of tribes in South America probably have done this. But how do you tell? Is there a lot of what's it called, the suture in the top of the head? You know how the baby's head? Do they have that what is it called? I'm trying to think what it's called.
Oh, the parietal.
Yes.
The parietal suture. Again, that's one of the characteristics. When you find one that looks like it's very natural in shape, then the next thing you look at are the sutures.
Right.
And for those that don't understand what that means, it means that when we were born, all of us,
right,
as humans, you're born with four major plates, which are you start off with it being cartilage when you're a baby, so you can leave your mom comfortably.
Right.
And then over the course of 2 or 3 years, that turns into bone material. And so the sutures are these lines where the plates meet one another. And so we have one just above our forehead going horizontally, and then another one that meets it, which forms a T shape going backwards to the back of your skull. But in the natural elongated conehead ones, there is no parietal suture. There is no suture that goes backwards, from your forehead
right
to the back.
That is. So you said you have done DNA testing, or or still working on doing DNA testing?
Well, we've had some initial, very initial tests done in the United States, and that's, the interest level has caused us to, go through working with the Peruvian government and archaeologists to be able to formally send samples to a laboratory in the U.S. for further investigation.
What's your preliminary findings?
Well, the preliminary finding was that people have to remember that DNA is this incredibly long strand of molecules.
Yes.
Like something like 3 billion base pairs, they call them.
Yes.
And so what happens is that if you, for example, want to have your DNA tested, they'll take a swab from inside your mouth, or they'll take a blood sample and send it to a lab, and then what the computer does is that it will read your DNA, and then it will compare it
to others.
Almost with others with their massive Gentech database. And so the computer can quite quickly tell you if you are 75% Caucasian, 10% Asian, and 5% African, as a really simplistic way of saying things. But the geneticist from the initial test that he did, he said there are segments of DNA that are not in GenBank, meaning that there's no life form, literally, which matches. Like not simply not human, but there's no life form that we can match it to.
Hello.
And that's what causes you to do more DNA testing.
Hello.
And when this does come back and it does say the same thing, do you think this is going to be a big headline news? Because this could be
elongated.
I mean, really, this could change history in a lot of ways, improve a lot of things.
Well, I think it'll definitely show us that there are aspects of humanity that we don't understand. Like there could have been small groups of people related to us, but not exactly Homo sapiens like us, that lived in different parts of the world, and over time were either wiped out or interbred with other people.
Right.
And I think, I think at the minimum we're going to find that out.
Well, do you think it might have been mixed with something from not of this world? I mean, again, aliens or something of nature?
Well, it's
Breeding of.
It is possible. You
Okay.
can't you can't say no, but you can't say yes
Correct.
because we've only done initial tests. But the geneticist was in such shock that he said, "Get me more samples because I have to study this, and I'll do it for free."
Wow.
There you go.
You don't hear that too often.
There you go.
Not too often.
Yeah. So, when you say you live where again? I'm sorry.
Caracas.
Caracas. Paracas.
It's called Paracas. Yeah, it's 4 hours drive south of Lima.
And what do you still look for? Because I know you were, when I first reached out to you, you said you're in the jungles of Bolivia, and what are you still looking for out in the jungle? What are you looking for? Elongated skulls, or are you looking for other artifacts as you're out there?
Well, the strange thing about the place we were is it's called Samaipata, and it's in the middle of Bolivia, 6,000 feet up in the jungle. And there you find the top of the mountain has been carved with all sorts of niches and strange designs and stuff. And it's a place that, again, archaeologists try to say, well, primitive people did this, but it can't be the case because the designs and these niches, which are, the size, basically cutouts in stone the size of refrigerators, that match a lot of ancient sites that I've seen around Cusco in Peru.
Is there any vibrational feeling that you get from any places that you're visiting around that area?
Oh, always, always.
Yeah, it's figured.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at your brand new website, and I have to say I'm very, very impressed. And it's called hiddenhumanhistory.com. And when people go there, what are you hoping that people can find and look for on your website? Because it's a beautiful website.
Well, the great thing is that it's a giant, basically a giant database.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into the little search thing on the top right-hand side, you can type in any word. You could type in alien, you could type in pyramid, you could type in the Sphinx, you could type in Atlantis, and it will give you a number of different videos, articles, and photographs that you can look at.
So if we go on and look up elongated skulls, what are we going to find? What type of videos will be presented there?
You'll find at least 30 or 40 videos that I've made. I've got more than 700 on YouTube right now.
Wow. That's
so-
a lot.
You've been busy.
Yeah.
Actually, every 4 days I usually add another video of something really, really bizarre.
Well, what's the most bizarre thing that you've discovered?
Here we go.
Well, I'm curious because this was an Eddie question. Eddie, if Eddie was here, he would ask that question.
There you go.
Eddie is a co-host, and he's a psychic, and he loves going down to Peru and Machu Picchu.
Machu Picchu. He's been there 3 times.
Yeah, and but he always says when you do an archaeological site, or what is the most fascinating or one of the most bizarre things that you've ever found?
Well, actually, the most bizarre thing, well, there are so many, but I would say one.
Well, give us a few.
There was a recent documentary that was done by the Science Channel of this little skeleton that is just outside of Cusco, Peru, and its skull is the size of its torso.
Wow.
So if one is looking for something, that you could call alien, I would call it that. And I've taken many doctors and nurses to look at it, and they're all completely dumbfounded. They just go, I don't know what I'm looking at.
And does it look like a human skull, or what does it look like?
Well,
kind of describe it?
it's the skull, the neck, the body, and one arm. And honestly, without going too far, too crazy, I would say the most similar thing it looks like is a gray alien.
Really?
Say again. You kind of blip.
Yeah, you
what kind of
cut
alien?
out a little bit.
Uh, yeah, it does. It looks like a gray alien.
A gray, gray alien. Okay.
Yeah,
The
which is
alien gray. Okay.
Yeah.
And
That's
where?
about
and
about as close as I can describe it.
And where is this? Where is it located now?
It's located in a little museum an hour south of Cusco, Peru.
And I'm looking also at a elongated skull with looks like hair. Have you? And what is that actual?
Well, those hair extensions.
You have hair extension. Now, was that at the salon? Was with hair you can take DNA testing very very easily. And did you find the skull with hair, or just have you ever researched skull with actual hair still attached?
Yeah, actually, in the museum in Paracas, we have it's 4 or 5 that still have their hair, and the most fascinating one is a baby that died at about 20 months old, and it was unwrapped after 2,000 years about 6 months ago, and it had strawberry blonde hair.
Did it really? That's interesting.
Wow.
It must have been my ancestor.
Or mine.
Or yours.
A towhead.
So yeah, because I actually did the DNA testing through ancestry.com, and it is fascinating to find out.
You're a mutt.
I am a mutt. I am a mutt, but because people, every generation tell you, oh, you have this and this and this, but to find out that completely sometimes opposite of what we're told. So the baby and the some adults, do they come up to showing somewhat related or very similar with DNA testing? Are you getting any preliminaries on that to see if they're from different areas or kind of related to each other?
Well, the really interesting thing is that the area of Paracas, which is extreme desert,
right.
It's almost like Egypt, it's perfect for preserving organic material. So that's why we have elongated skulls with their hair intact, which is amazing. But the other amazing thing is that almost all of them have reddish brown hair and not black hair, which you would think if they were 100% Native American. So that that could mean that they have DNA from another part of the world.
And where has most been found? Like what actual site and country?
An area.
Yeah, an area that most of the elongated skulls have been found.
Well, again, I'm right in Paracas on the coast of Peru, 4 hours south of the capital, Lima, and most of them are within, I'd say, 20 square miles of where I'm at right now.
What is your view and again maybe preliminary thoughts on what these are, where they maybe came from?
We're starting to think that there's a Middle Eastern connection, that the ancestors of these people came from somewhere around possibly Iraq or Iran several thousand years ago as seafarers. And they founded this spot and lived here in peace. And then they were, about 2,000 years ago, they seem to have been attacked by a local culture and were wiped out.
That wasn't very good neighborly. That wasn't good neighbors right there. All right, so I want to again, before we get you out of here, I want to talk about the tour coming up. And now this is coming up in March, right?
Right, March 8th to 21st.
Now,
There's still space, folks.
There's still space. We want you to get tickets. So give us the first leg of the tour.
Well, we begin at Giza itself, so we get to look at the Great Pyramid, etc., and
right.
area, and then after that, we start to travel south, including a 4-day cruise on the Nile in a 5-star floating hotel. And like the great thing about one of the great things about this tour is that it's all 5-star, high class, high quality, everything. And then we travel down to the very southern part of Egypt, and then fly back and visit a bunch of other sites. And then finally, what we're going to do is we get exclusive access to the interior of the Great Pyramid, just our group, for 2 hours. And we also get the Sphinx to ourselves as well for 2 hours.
Wow,
Wow.
that would be great.
Oh, wow.
Do you have any other sites that you have recently discovered that you're going to go do some researching or excavating?
Yeah, well, the great thing is that right after that tour, we're going to fly to Lebanon, and we're going to go to a site called Baalbek, which is where you find the largest cut stones in the world. Some of them are 1,500 tons.
That is huge. That is huge. And are you going to see if the technology is very similar to what Egypt used?
Yeah, that's what we're planning on doing, is comparing the cut marks at Baalbek with those at in Egypt. There's also evidence that some of the red granite at Baalbek was moved more than 1,000 miles from the quarry.
1,000 miles.
Have you been to Baalbek before?
No, I can't wait for this.
Okay, so that's your first maiden voyage. Okay.
And have you found any evidence or similarities to any of the Mayan, Incas, or Machu Picchu cuts to the cutting technology compared to Egypt?
No, the great thing is that the work that was done in the area of Cusco, supposedly by the Inca in Peru, is a completely different form of technology than what we find in Egypt.
That's fascinating.
So that's why we brought Stephen down in September to compare. And so we're looking at two incredibly advanced civilizations, probably living at the same time, but not the same civilization, somebody else.
So there might be two different parts of the world at similar times, and they were obviously independent of each other. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And again, because of this global sea rise almost 12,000 years ago, there could be literally cities underwater in the Mediterranean and off the coast of different countries that are either being hushed up or have not been discovered yet.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I'm sure for people like yourself, that's what keeps you going.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Have you done any excavating in the ocean at all?
No, I think thanks to stuff like Google Earth,
right,
we're able to see that there are remnants of cities off the southern coast of India, and in possibly many other parts of the world.
And I'm taking you live down in South America, but is that your favorite place to be or go to do researching?
And actually, in fact, just to live as well, because the climate here is like Hawaii.
Oh, nice.
Where I lived before, so it's always, t-shirts and flip-flops all the time.
Yeah, not going back to Minnesota, Canada, where you were born and raised.
No.
Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm from Kansas, so I'm like, California for me.
Yeah, I can always send a postcard, but that's about as much as they're going to get.
That's right. All right, well, we're going to get you out of here, and everybody, please go to his website and tell him one more time. It's hiddenhumanhistory.com. And do you have an email, or not email, a Twitter and Facebook? Could you tell people that?
Yeah, if you just go to either that website or hiddenincatours.com, there's a contact form where people can email me. Also, people can subscribe, or they can follow on Twitter and Facebook and Google Plus and a bunch of other things.
So we can find you.
You bet.
Well, when Eddie gets back, and we'd love to have you back, and especially after the tour to see how it went.
We want to hear a semi-full report.
Yeah, because we don't get to go, and we have to live our life through you, I guess. So you're going to have to be our ears and eyes. So, but we want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you take care of yourself down there, and keep up the great work and keeping us fascinated. And hope you do well.
Thanks, Brien.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
And don't worry about sending us a postcard. We'll get you on the other side of the show.
That's right.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye. All right. We're almost out of here. Almost out of here. So we are so honored to have you guys stick around with us, and
thanks for listening.
We hope you guys enjoy the show. And go to the new website, Truth Be Told.
Yeah, I was just perusing it. It's a cool website. It's a cool website.
.com. So Truth Be Told, webtv.com. And check out upcoming shows. Make sure you stick around in February 6th through the 8th, when we're going to be at Conscious Life Expo. We're going to have all kinds of experts and people from ancient aliens, people from the best-selling authors, to angel experts, to psychics. I think we're going to have pretty much everybody, Walt. So
we got it all covered.
And we're going to be there for 3 days. So just watch it right here on Universal Broadcasting Network. We have a new website coming up, so you're going to be able to
next month.
Yes, it's going to be amazing, and so I hope you guys enjoy it. We'd love to hear about it. And anyway, so Walt, thank you so much for being
My pleasure.
here with me.
We'll be back.
Oh no, we're going to be back.
Oh,
so
yeah. And
all right.
do we know when our next episode is?
I'm not. I know the 30th. I'm not for sure.
Okay.
I may have somebody next week. I'm not for sure because he hasn't confirmed. But I know the 30th, and but we'll figure it out.
Alrighty then.
All right. Take care, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
This has been On Air with Tony Sweet. Don't worry, there's more online. Search On Air with Tony